Hello, this is Charity Gibson, and I am doing Steven Spielberg's consulting deal with Universal Studios. So the parties involved in this negotiation is Steven Spielberg, who everyone knows directs pretty popular films, and Universal Studios, which I still have not had the opportunity to actually go and visit when I live here right in Florida, which is kind of funny. Eventually I might. Anyway, their relationship started back in January 20th, 1987, when Steven Spielberg signed a consulting contract with Universal Studios. Universal Studios, of course, was the biggest thing about this negotiation deal is that they were trying to restructure their financial situation because they owe like 1.5 billion in debt. And so they needed Spielberg to extend his contract so they didn't have to, buy him out for all of the things that he was a part of, the attractions that were done at their location. So basically that's what this negotiation was over, was kind of keeping him on a contract where they only paid so much per year, and they didn't have to pay out like one huge lump sum. So Steven Spielberg's position was, basically what he wanted in the contract was to continue his, percentage of the gross revenue he was getting per year. The things that I read between various articles, it was 2% to 5.25%, and I'm thinking that's because it probably did get measured up from the previous percentage, so that way he was making a little bit more since he was extending the contract. The other thing was he wanted to get out of his obligations to NBC Universal by having it sold. So Universal Studios' position was basically just requesting an extended contract with Steven Spielberg till at least 2017, so that way they could, get into a financial situation where they could negotiate with him to buy him out at that time. So of course this was taking place in 2009, so that gave them quite a bit of time to fix their financial situation. So Steven Spielberg's interests, of course, was still getting paid for his consulting on the theme park attractions. He wanted Universal Studios to find ways to fix their financial situation. And of course, he wants his own company, DreamWorks Studios, to do, stuff with Disney. And that included theme park attractions. But of course, he can't until his contract is up with Universal Studios. So in that, he knew that if he went into this negotiation, that if the contract did extend, that he'd be looking at a longer time before he could do anything with Disney and his films under DreamWorks Studios. And of course, he wanted to get out of, other obligations so that way he could move forward with DreamWorks business in the future. Universal Studios' interest was basically, they wanted time to take care of their debt and to fix things financially. And they also wanted to make sure to make Steven Spielberg happy for their continued business under the term of that contract that they were going to extend with him. So the three negotiation techniques and concepts that I believe were used during this negotiation were, the BATNA technique, also mutual benefits, and of course objective criteria. They had to kind of see from other perspectives like how this would go down, as well as understanding where Steven Spielberg was sitting, as well as Steven Spielberg was understanding where Universal was sitting, and of course how they both can still continue to mutually benefit each other with this extended contract. What I think went well was Steven Spielberg and Universal Studios, of course, they had to have strong communication with one another, especially to understand where each person was coming from. They had to listen to each other's needs. That had to have been, the biggest one right there. And they also had to make compromises for each other's businesses, which I think all of that went well. What I think went wrong was from the very beginning, neither one of them were completely happy with wanting to do the negotiation in the first place due to each other's circumstances. Uh, basically, for instance, Steven Spielberg wanted out of the contract, and Universal, of course, wanted to extend the contract due to their financial circumstances. If their financial circumstances weren't a problem, I'm sure that they would have been more than glad to, pay Steven Spielberg and move on. But that wasn't the circumstance. So they had to deal with an unhappy situation from the very beginning. The other thing is, of course, going back to the compromise, I believe that's a right and a wrong, because they both had to make compromises on things that they probably didn't want to compromise on. And of course, that's, it led to kind of some conflicts and such, but either way, I think they were able to work it out really well. So yes, an agreement was reached when Steven Spielberg decided to extend the contract until 2017 from 2009. And of course, then he can re-engage in negotiations for the buyout at that time. I believe, Steven Spielberg had created a long-term relationship with Universal. He understood their dilemma and why they were not able to, to buy him out at the time. And so he was willing to extend his contract so that way those things could get fixed, for future. And of course, in talking about future, as long as Spielberg has plans to do stuff with Disney, once his contract is up, he won't be able to work with Universal in the future when that happens. So in that aspect, I don't see future work with Universal once Steven Spielberg is out of the contract. And here are my references that I used for this slideshow, and thank you for your time.